Good morning everybody and welcome to this live watercolour demonstration with me, Matthew Palmer. Working with Search Press today, so this will be a wonderful thing to do. So hopefully settle back, you've got a coffee and you're going to watch this this live watercolour demonstration. So looking forward to doing this with you folks. And what's interesting about this is that I'm not going to use any sketching or anything. I'm just going to go straight in. White sheet of paper. The paper I'm using is quarter imperial, so it's a standard kind of size watercolor paper. So it's something that for me, it's all about getting the paper right. And if you get yourself a good quality sheet of watercolor paper, you know, you're halfway there. So this is cotton paper, and it's a lovely stuff to actually use and to enjoy. So it's a quarter imperial sheet of watercolour paper. I've stuck it to a board with some masking tape. I mean, that could be a piece of cardboard, but you can do this picture any size and you can watch this back and have a go yourself. We're also going to be a bit cautious about what colours we use, folks. I want to keep this nice and simple for you, so I'm going to use 3 colours. We're going to use primary colours, so red, yellow and blue. Now these could be any variation of those colours, if we're being honest. But the ones I'm using are my own make of colour. I've got these colours called Matthew Palmer Natural Colours. We've got natural yellow light. We'll get a nice close-up of that. Natural yellow light watercolour. We're going to use natural blue, which is a vibrant blue. And I'm going to use natural red, which is like a crimson. Now, it wouldn't matter if you used a different variation on this. So, for example, you could use like French ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, or you could use cadmium yellow. Just 3 primary colours, but make sure it's quite a bright yellow and a crimson red rather than something too bright, because that can affect the picture itself. So I've got it stuck to a board. I've squirted my colours into my palette. Now you could just use a plate for a palette. I've got plenty of water here as well, and also I've got a few brushes. Now if we're keeping things nice and simple, I'm sticking to a few standard watercolour brushes here as well. I'll mention some other brushes as we go through, but we've got a large brush here, this one being a size 20 brush, something like that. So this is a size 20 brush. We've got a size 10 round brush, we've got a 6, and I've got something for detail. This one here is a branching detail brush, which if you have a look on the website just here, you can find those. It's like a pointy rigger brush, but some kind of fine brush will do the job. That'll pretty much do the job. I've got some other brushes to talk about as we go through, but I'm here with Search Press today, folks. So I just want to mention my background with Search Press. I've been working with them since 2011, actually, and in that time we've produced quite a few books, and this was my first book, Watercolour for the Absolute Beginner. Now this particular one has gone on to be one of the best-selling watercolour books of all time, and I'm really pleased. Obviously, I'm chuffed about this. It's a bestseller worldwide. It's full of step-by-step tutorials on watercolour. You've even got these pre-drawings in the middle, so if you're not a fan of sketching, you can use these as well. So that's Watercolour for the Absolute Beginner. We then went on to write another book called Step-by-Step Guide to Watercolours, which is here, and you can check this one out, folks. Again, it's like a continuation, really. I've even wrote a book on called Painting Without Paint, which is using your tablet. So if you're interested in working on iPads and tablets, check that out. That's using digital art, which is wonderful. And just recently, using the 3 colours I'm using today, Watercolour Mountains is also available. But let's get stuck into this, folks, okay? Let's get stuck in and chuck some paint on this paper. So I'm going to zoom nice and close in so we can see what we're talking about here. There we go. Oh, here's a few examples of my kind of paintings, by the way, Seascapes, just to give you some kind of idea of my kind of style. There's one over here of this kind of beach hut scene here, and there's a little squirrel just peeking at the back just there as well. So that's the kind of thing I do. I'm actually in the process of writing a book called 30-minute watercolours on animals, actually, and that'll be out at some point next year. So keep an eye on that one. So let's chuck some paint on the paper now, folks, and let's go for this. So what we're going to do here is make sure we can see all the paper. There we go. And then I'm going to start off by wetting the entire sheet of paper just with a big brush. Now this one, like I said, it's roughly a size 20 brush, so it's up to you how you want to play this. Any kind of large brush, but I'm going to wet the entire sheet of paper. Now because I'm working on cotton, what's going to happen is it's going to actually go in first. pretty much going to disappear, the water, because that's what happens with watercolour, especially if you're using a nice cotton paper like this. So I'm putting the water on, and then we're going to go for vibrancy. We're going to put the sun on this, we're going to put some lovely clouds in this, and we're going to create a nice picture for you folks. So stick with us, because this thing will evolve over the next sort of 3/4 of an hour, something like that. So plenty of water. Now that's had a couple of coats of water, if I'm being honest there. So that's had a couple of coats of nice water. Let's go straight into some colour then. So what we'll do is we're going to take a nice thick yellow. Now yellow is one of the few colours that you can use vivid. So I'm talking a rich, vivid yellow here, straight in. It looks a little bit more of a greeny tinge, but when it dries, that's because for some reason the live stream always puts yellows a bit greeny. I don't know why that is. It might be the white balance of the camera possibly, but we'll bring that across. Don't be afraid to use vibrancy, okay? This is a nice, clean, bright yellow. It's going to go straight across. It's going to come down and kind of fade into nothing at the bottom. So the bottom third is going to be sea, the top is going to be sky, and that's what we're talking about here. So rich yellow. You can almost take it straight from the tube yellow. Now this is natural yellow light. It could be cadmium yellow, it wouldn't really matter, to be honest, what the actual colour is, but just some kind of vibrant yellow is kind of the secret to this, okay? So just bear that in mind. Just try and get something nice and vivid, nice and vibrant, and then we'll bring it across. Let's clean the brush out really well, and what we'll do now is we're going to take something to turn the colour orange. So we've got the yellow, we'll pop the red into this. Now this is natural red. Now I don't mind using the red quite vibrant, to be honest, so I can be quite vivid with this, and pop that across the top. I want to kind of waft it all in a bit, waft it all in. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about those nice rich sunsets. Down at the bottom as well, we'll bring that in across the base, and we'll sweep it up. And in a few minutes we're going to soften all this together, okay? Beautiful. So we'll clean that out, wipe off the excess on the side. Let's now take some blue. Let's pop some blue into that same mixture, so we've got a bit of a purpley sort of tinge coming through. So that's the blue mixing with the red. We'll put that across the top. It's gone like a grey colour, purpley grey. We'll bring that in so it mixes. And at this point I'm going to pop a little bit of that down at the bottom. Not a huge amount, but just a little bit down at the bottom, okay? So just a few kind of horizontal brush strokes around there. Still with that nice big brush. Cleaning my brush out really well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe off the excess so the brush is almost dry. Squeeze it through my fingers, and I'm going to go back into these colours and I'm going to soften the reds and blend it all in so it all becomes part of the mixture of the sky there. Now I shall put some clouds in this a little bit later. We'll get to them very shortly. So I'm going to soften all this in, make sure we've got plenty of colour. I want to pop the sun on this thing as well, so I've got a sun painting tool which I'm going to stamp probably about there. It's basically a round coin wrapped in tissue, okay? So you can't go wrong with that, can you, really, to be honest? It's just a round coin in a bit of tissue. A penny, an English penny. Okay, let's put some clouds into this. Now for the clouds, I want to get like a two-tone thing going off. I want to get a mixture of different colours here. So what I'm actually going to use, I'm actually going to use a blending blade. Now I don't have to use this. I could use a size 10 brush, but I've got, this is my own particular paintbrush here. I could use a size 10 brush for this, and I'll explain the differences between the two. If I'm using a blending blade, it's a brush I designed a few years ago, and basically it allows you to work with multiple colours, and you've not got to worry about, is this thing wet, is it dry? Let's get a bit closer in so we can see what we're doing on the sky. So I want to put some clouds in. So it doesn't matter if your paper is dry at this point, okay? So what I want to do is I want to take a couple of colours here. So I want to take some blue, put some blue on one side of the brush. I want to mix it with a bit of red. So we get a bit of a purple. We can see that kind of rich, sort of dark, deep purple there. But notice that's stuck to one side of the brush. Now that's quite a nice thing to do. On the opposite side, we'll take the yellow and we'll pop some red into that to turn it an orange. So we've got a bit of a bluey side and a bit of an orangey side to the brush. I'm going to lay this thing flat and we're going to twist in these rich colours. But notice I'm getting the two the silhouette clouds, but I'm getting the rich vibrancy. Let's get close in because we can do that, so we can see what we're talking about here. So I'm going to move the brush across, twist across. Let's put one over this side as well. Turn the brush over. The special hairs in this brush allow it to kind of stick to the bristle. There you go. So you get those nice clouds. I'll pick up some more colour. We'll get the red on one side, we'll get the pink on the other. Now what I want to do is I want to soften these in very shortly. We'll get there. Let's pop one just here. In fact, I can bring that one over the sun actually. Pop another one just here as well. Now I want to work these in. Paper's pretty much dry, so I want to work these clouds in to the sky. Let's get nice and close for this so we can see this in action. Clean my brush really well. Again, I could do this with a size 10 brush, but what I would do is put the purple mix on first, followed by the actual orange. So I would sort of do a layer of the blue and a layer of the red and the yellow mix. Now if I clean the brush out, the first thing I want to do is I want to soften the base of these things. So I want to wipe the base of the clouds, or wipe the bottoms of the clouds, should we say. Nice bit of softening going off there. I keep wiping it through my fingers. It's designed for lifting off the colour as well, this brush, which is nice. And I can use the top of this brush to soften the tips of the clouds. I can fade the clouds into the sky as well. So I want to soften them out. And it doesn't matter, here's the thing with this brush, it doesn't matter if the paper is wet or dry. I can just continue to go back in as much as I like. And I can reactivate it because watercolour is what we call fugitive. It doesn't really permanently dry to the paper. So this is going to make a big difference to this sky. Softening the tops of these clouds. Every so often I'll clean the brush because as I'm doing this, it's kind of picking up some colour. So if you're painting this again at a later stage or you're working along at home with the three colours, just bear in mind it's worth having. It's worth spending that little bit of time with this brush. And for the first time in watercolours, I wanted to, because I teach workshops all around the UK. I mean, obviously I'm not at the minute because I'm sort of, you know, in the studio all the time doing live stuff, but my life is travelling the UK and teaching art basically. And if you check out the website here, Watercolour TV, you'll see all the workshops that we do. We're currently doing live workshops at the minute, so there's one on Sunday. So if you want to paint along with me, we're painting a summer cottage, and it's on Sunday the 19th. You can join in. Again, if you have a look on the website just here, you can see all the information about those live workshops. So I wanted to make a brush that would let people go back in and spend time on clouds, because one of the biggest issues with watercolour is the drying time. Once these things dry, you can't really do much with it, but this brush has got this special stiff bristle that allows me to reactivate it, and that nice shape as well works lovely for clouds. So it's a nice little thing to work with. So I can spend as much or as little time on this. I can look back at the picture, I can see the clouds, I can soften them in as much as I want to. I can remove colour, because if you think about this, let's get closer in. If you think about the fact that the clouds the sun is kind of illuminating from the bottom, I can sort of wipe this thing up. So I can soften this thing up into the... You can see it's taking a bit of colour out. So imagine the sun's catching it. If I do this on a bit of an angle as well, it works really well. So you can see it's dead easy to wash off. I kind of squeeze it through the fingers every time I do this. So Penny's mentioned in the comments that she always struggles with skies and clouds. Well, if you stick to three colours, I mean, that's a great way of being a bit more relaxed about it, and it also gets you thinking about colour mixing as well. And if you've got a specialist brush like this that allows you to remove colour and allows you to blend, it's called a blending blade for this reason, you can put as much time as you like into this thing, you know, and you can really manipulate it and you can tweak it as much as you like at any stage. So a nice bit of softness going off, blending away at the ends. Beautiful. Now if we zoom back a couple of clicks on that, we can see we've pretty much got a sky there. Pretty much got a sky, and that's what I want, you know. So a nice silhouetted sky. even if this thing was dry, you know, and I wanted to come back to it later, I could do this. We've all seen these vibrant sunsets, and we've all seen them with the nice dark, almost clouds that are silhouetting against the actual paper. So that is my background. Now I want to paint in something at the base. I want to put some cliffs in, I want to put some water, some boats maybe as well, and I just want to make this thing come through. Now the paper is still a little bit damp to the touch. That's fine. I could use a hairdryer, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go straight in with this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some masking tape, make it long enough to go across, wipe off the excess, even going to wipe the moisture from the brow. I've got about 4 or 5 spotlights shining down on this picture here, so it's drying fairly quickly. Just going to pop this somewhere where I think it works. I'm not going to worry about the rules of thirds. That to me is not of interest, you know. What I'm interested in really is how the composition works. So this wants to have enough space below the clouds to have enough water, but it doesn't matter if it's a quarter or a third. I'm going to pop it about there actually. Pop that thing just sort of here like this. The main thing is make sure it's pretty straight. I'm just going to make that a bit higher on that side. Ideally you'd want to have a dry piece of paper at this point. So we've got a question come through from Leonard asking, is it always advisable to put your tube of paint fresh in before you start painting? I would say yes, a little bit of paint squirted in the tube into the palette does actually work quite well. It's not essential, you know. You could have a squirt of paint that's been in your palette for a couple of years and still use it, because watercolour is good for that. But if you want to go for vibrancy, then you want to get fresh squirts absolutely every time, okay? That's what I'd recommend to you. So that's nice and dry. Let's get a bit closer into this then. And what we're going to do here, folks, is we're going to paint in some cliffs, some distance, some mountains, that kind of thing. And we're going to make this thing look as though we've got some depth to the sea at the bottom. So for this, I'm going to use a size 10 brush. I'm coming down on the brushes here. I've got the 10. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer so we can see the horizon. Pop that just there. Beautiful. And what I want to do here is I'm going to use a grey. Now a grey is kind of, it's a mix of all the 3 colours really. So if you take some blue and you pop a touch of red and a touch of yellow, it's going to kind of go a bit greyy. I've kind of got something grey there, which is kind of a bit of all 3 colours. We do actually sell something called natural grey, which is a ready-made version of this colour. Here's a bit of a tip, folks. Just watch out for using the likes of Payne's Grey. It's too black, okay? So over this side of the picture, with the size 10 brush, you can see the paper's dry. We're going to paint in some distant mountains and what have you. So I'm going to pop that in like so. Get some little spikes on these things. Give it some character. And bring this down here. Clean my brush really well. Give it a couple of wipes on the tissue. And I'm going to use a bit of water to soften this thing down, so it kind of fades off and disappears into the mist, let's say. So we'll bring that down towards the masking tape. Now, if you're using masking tape and you're working along, or you're doing this at a later stage, you do expect to get a little bit of seepage sometimes down the back of these things. That's fine, you can hide that later. I'll show you how to do that. Excuse me. So, total escapism, that's what watercolour painting is. Now, I want to bring in some cliffs down this side, but I want to give that a few seconds to dry. And while it is drying off, what I'm going to do is I want to squeeze the brush through the fingers. This is the size 10 brush. I'm going to lay it flat, and I can put some little bits of light in this thing, okay? Just a little bit of light where the sun would maybe catch. It doesn't matter that much at this stage. I'll probably drop some shadows in this later. But imagine where the sun's... These things are meant to be really in the distance, so I'm not too concerned. But that little bit of light does actually give a little bit of something extra to it, which is quite nice. It works, don't it? Thanks, Jean. She's saying she's got the books and she's loving them, so thank you. The Watercolour for the Absolute Beginner book has been an absolute... It was my first book, and it was a concept I came up with, and I approached Search Press about this, like say 9 years ago or something like that. And I kind of self-published a book very similar to this in the early days, and I'll mention this while this thing's drying off, because I can't move on until that's had a few seconds to dry. and that evolved into this book, and we did this in the classic kind of Search Press style, so you've got all the wonderful step-by-step tutorials. Here's some of the pictures that you get in the book. You've got this wonderful kind of Lake District scene here with all the stages. You get this nice kind of bluebell wood, which is coming up to that season now. Again, all step-by-step. Lake District with the cottage, lovely picture to do. We've also got the sort of wintry scene. I love painting snow scenes. There's a nice one there. Again, all step by step for you. And seascapes, we've got a seascape picture here with all the stages to do it. So it's a thorough book, including the sketches. And of course, you've got all these wonderful little... The first half of the book is very much, you know, all the essential little bits you need, colour mixing, primary colours, all that stuff, sketching. And then it takes you into the picture. It's a thick book. And it is, I believe it's one of the best-selling watercolour books that Search Press actually do. So check it out, folks. If you're stuck in the house at the minute, like most of us are, you know, it's a good time to get some paint flowing. Yeah, get some paint flowing. Let's paint in this part of the picture here. On this side, we're bringing cliffs down. Now for this, I want to take the masking tape off a little bit. I'm going to bring it a little bit lower. So I want to pop the masking tape a little bit lower. Can you see that bit of seepage just down the back here? That's fine. That'll all get lost in the water. So I'll put that down, and I'll bring in some richer cliffs. We're talking more definite colours. Again, I'm using the grey. So I'm mixing more of the grey here, which is the 3 primary colours. But nice and rich for the mixture. Nice and strong, okay? Nice and heavy. Bit of an orange, so we'll get some yellow and red for that. So we'll get a bit of a sort of rusty orange, so it's the yellow and red. Bit of blue crept in there, so it's gone a bit brown. That's fine. We can live with that. We can live with that. And then we're going to go for the some kind of a green. Now obviously green is yellow and blue. That's pretty easy to do. So we'll take some of the green as well. It's a bit of a dark green, but it's fine. It's fine. So we've kind of got 3 sort of random colours there that we're going to use in this. But the grey is going to go in first, and these colours want to be quite thick. So I want to start off quite shallow here. I want to gradually bring this thing up, and it's going to start to overlap what we've just done. Now if you've got a bit of a jitter as you do this, it works really well. Make sure it's nice and dark across here. Make sure the tape's stuck down as well. I'll bring this thing up here, put some little bits sticking out there as well. So obviously we're talking silhouettes here, but we're going to get a little bit more detail than silhouette. This will grow on you. Stick with us through this demo, folks. We're going to bring this thing through. Bring this thing up here. And it's all part of the effect of depth. So this piece here, this left corner, that can be quite high, and don't be afraid to make that quite high as well. Revisit this, because I'm using strong colours. This is just the grey I'm using here, the mix of the 3 primaries. I can quite happily spend as much time as I like dotting and spotting and dabbing on this thing and giving it as much character as I want to, okay? And bring that all the way across there. Now it doesn't matter what goes inside here. You could pop a little face if you wanted to. That's like a clown, don't it? It doesn't matter what goes in there. Put a few random marks. Then what we'll do is we'll pick up some of the other colours. So I've got this rusty brown here. We're going to bring this in. Give it a good old scrub. So this is the yellow and the red. So it's kind of an orangey, browny colour really. I'll pop some of that in. You want to make sure that all the colours are mixing though. So I'm going back in to the grey, and I'm scrubbing these things in. So I'm not just having a patch of grey and a patch of these kind of red colour. I'm getting all the colours working together. We've then got the green. We've got the green as well. So we're going to take some of the green that I mixed and pop a little bit of that in there. It'll all come out in the wash. So we're going to pop this in here. Again, it's pretty much silhouetting at this point, making sure that all this is blending in, creating depth, creating distance. So it's a big block of colour. Looks like a dog's dinner at the minute, but that is all part of watercolour. And people that do it probably know what I'm talking about. I want to pop some interest in these in a second or two. Just want to make sure that the colours are blending. Again, it's pretty much accepted that you're going to get a bit of seepage down the back of that tape, but that will become reflection. Now, if we zoom back so we can see the entire horizon, we've got this huge chunk of dark colour. It looks a little bit awkward, but what I'm going to do is put light into it. And for this I'm going to use a plastic card here. I've got my SIA membership card, that'll do the job. So I want to use this, I want to take some paint out, I want to scrape it off. And this to me is where it comes alive, okay? So I'm going to use the sort of short edge of any flexible card. I'm going to go up and I'm going to take the paint out. You can see it's removed some of the colour. Now, you wipe off, you can see the colour that's come off if you look close at that there. Can you see that sort of edge? Wipe that out there. And we'll continue to do this, working down the edge here, and so on. And just putting as much character. Certain pigments will stain the paper. Certain pigments will stain. Certain pigments will just work and come off, but the reds will stain more than the yellows, for example. Which is wonderful for this because it gives character to it, and that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in giving shape and form to this. And I'm putting more energy where the sun would be catching. So it's turned this big block of solid colour into something a little bit more adventurous. Excuse me, the hay fever's kicking in today. I think we had me sneezing all morning. I've been taking the old antihistamines, which means I'll fall asleep at any minute. So we're going to make sure this is nicely in. There we go. So you can see that nice bit of rocky area. Imagine cliffs, imagine rocks. We can manipulate these a little bit later. We can add a little bit more to them if we feel the need to. Okay. Beautiful. Now what I want to do here. So that works really well. I'm going to take the masking tape off actually. Let's just take a look back at the whole kind of picture. Take that off nice and steady. See the bit of seepage? That's going to go in a minute. So we'll take that off nice and slowly. So that's kind of slightly more forward. If we look back at the whole scene, we can see. Using the same piece of masking tape because I'm a tight artist. Got to be careful how you say that. But that's going to come a little bit lower down. Probably about here. So a touch lower. Again, we're going to pop that on. And then we're going to use a slightly smaller brush. A number 6 brush. Let's get a wee bit closer again so we can see what's happening here. Beautiful. And we're going to use pretty much the same principle but smaller. So I've got the grey. There's the grey. I've got the other colours, the greens and the reds. They've all got a bit mixed up, but that's all part of what we're talking about. Okay, it's all part of the fun of painting. This is going to come down here. Imagine a little sort of line of rocks that you're going to see going out to the sea, and as we move across here we're going to start to connect this thing into what we've just done. So I'm sort of sticking with the grey really. I just keep working a bit of the other colours into it. I've got the number 6 brush, which is obviously a much smaller brush here, making sure the bottom edge is all working, attaching it. Pop little sort of spots and dots. Imagine there's like sort of lines of boulders, lines of rocks going out to sea, which you've all seen before. You've been to the sea. The main thing is that here, this left side, that you kind of attach it, so that's important. Make sure you get that nice attach there. We can paint over the top of any huge seepage that we're concerned about here as well. Bring that little bit in there. Going to put a bit of softness into this. Working this in, working in between the credit card, plastic card scrapes that we just added. There we go. And if we take the tape off, we've got another line of rocks there, you see. And then if we do another one, probably about here. Now again, if anyone wants to paint along, this Sunday we've got a live watercolour workshop happening. I've been doing them for quite a while now, and you paint along, and the details are just sort of here. They're also in the description for the demo we're doing today. So have a little look at that. You might enjoy those. Pop some little rocks here as well. Pop some little lines of boulders. We can leave a bit of a gap for this one if we want to. Doesn't need to go all the way along. Take that tape off. So we're doing smaller basically. You can see that sort of line of rocks that where the sea's bringing it forward. Let's just keep going with this. Let's bring another one down here. I want to put a greater gap there because if I have a greater gap, it's bringing the picture closer to us, which is quite nice. Let's get this one coming in here, and let's bring that one. Bring this one down here. We can make that one a bit larger if we want to. Put some little individuals here and there. It's all part of the fun, isn't it? At the same time as doing this, I can go back into these rocks and add a bit of darkness to the base of them, add in a bit of extra texture to them. It'll all come out in the wash. Over this side, where these distant mountains are, if I make the grey more diluted, adding more water to it, I just want to revisit these for a few minutes. Actually, I'll just finish this section here off first, take the tape off. There we go, we can see those kind of rocky areas. I can add as many or as few of these as I like afterwards. Of course you can, it's dead easy to do that. But if we look over this side here, if the picture was to finish there, you've got a scene, but obviously we're going to keep going with this. Let's take a look here over this side. And let's put a bit of interest to the base. Let's bring some interest just here coming along this line. I'm going to pop a few shadows down the opposite side of these mountains as well. So I'm trying to bear in mind where the light would be, that kind of thing. So I'm just popping some of the grey, but a little bit of a lighter grey. So I've diluted the colour down. And I'm just going to use a bit of water here. Not a huge amount, just a damp brush. So it's always worth giving it a bit of a tap on tissue before you actually move on. But working in some shadow, can you see how it's giving shape? Jean's looking forward to Sunday's workshop. Well done, Jean. Yeah, well, we are. I'm going to keep doing these. It's a great way of enjoying isolation, actually. You know, if you're wanting to do something new. When I've been teaching watercolours now since the late 90s, and it's basically my life is teaching. I love teaching, and yeah, you'll enjoy it. The picture we're doing on Sunday is a cottage with a garden, cottage garden, so, and flowers, that kind of thing. So it's all step by step, and no sketching is required. You just turn up with a white piece of paper, and away you go. You can't go wrong, really. Beautiful. So that's given some interest to that area. It's given more depth, more distance. We can relook at this later if we want to. As the painting evolves. Let's come back here, let's take a look at the picture as it stands now, so we can see we've got this wonderful vibrant watercolour here. We're going to bring water, we're going to put some sort of foreground in this thing as well, we're going to put reflections in, we're going to put rolling waves, let's put some water in this thing as well. It's all about creating interest and life. Now on the top of the hill here, I want to bring in a bit of a silhouette of a building, so I want to zoom in nice and close, like an old sort of shack on the top. There's Mr. Squirrel, look. To get nice and close into the top. Let's zoom in close here so we can see the detail actually. We can see the detail there. Let's have a look what's in the palette. It's a bit like a murder scene, to be honest, at the minute. But I've got these kind of rusty colours here, and I want to use that colour, and I want to pop in like a little bit of a building, just like an old sort of cottage or something by the sea or whatever. And I'm just going to make it look as though it's got some character to this thing. Let's pop a line just here as well. Put some little spots and dots on the end. So that's the roof of the building. This will give scale, which is important, okay? So I'm going to pop that in, which works. And then we'll just going to pop another one of those just actually to the side. I think would be nice there, just a smaller one. There we go. So popped in a couple of little roofs there. Now on the tops of those, we're going to add some detail, but we'll give that a few seconds to dry. Now using the grey, the rich grey that we've been using, let's paint in the shadow side of the building. So let's go nice and dark, sticking with the number 6 brush here. So really rich darkness. I can work that into the rocks as well. So I'm putting the dark side, because yes, buildings do have dark sides. Bring that down here. Beautiful. Let's pop in a few little sort of dots and dabs. I mean, this thing dries pretty quickly, to be honest. There's a bird sat on the top of that one. Can you see it? It's a bearded chuff. What we're going to do is we're going to pop in a bit of a line down here. A bit of a line underneath there. And we're going to soften that in. We're going to soften those in to give us the starting point of the building. Okay, so I'm just going to work that in. Just using a bit of water, but I'm dabbing off the excess on the tissue before I put it on, okay? So you can see how it gives that nice little bit of, well, it gives the sort of basic building, really, you know, that's all I'm interested in. We can get a little bit closer in for you there so you can see. And we can manipulate this, we can add detail to it, but it really wants a few seconds to dry before we do anything further to that. I'll pop some windows and doors and things on. Little bits of interest around the side as well always helps. So in the context of the picture, that's given us a nice bit of scale to the scene. Very tiny, but they are there. Now in the foreground of this, I want to start to bring in some water and a bit of a beach, and some nice kind of rolling waves would also make the picture work really well, and that's quite important as well. So I'm just going to revisit the grey for a second, make sure this edge is nice and dark. So I'll bring that in. We shall be reflecting the sun later on in this picture as well, we'll get to that. So mountains, something I've spent my life painting because I teach painting holidays in the Lake District, and I have done for about 15-16 years, and of course we've got a book that I wrote by Search Press called Watercolour Mountains, and this is just like we're doing here because it's using just the 3 colours, and you get basically 9 tutorials all themed around mountain scenes. I mean, that's a bit of a Lake District scene there, so have a look for that one, folks. That's the most recent book. It came out sort of last August time, so that one is out there for you to enjoy. And again, it's just using the 3 colours. Remember that one, that's quite important to say. Let's mix a bit of a sandy colour. Now a sandy colour, like a bit of a beach colour. So I want to mix orange. I want to pop a touch of blue with it, and it'll give you this kind of sort of burnt yellow, like a sort of dark yellow. This is quite good for doing a bit of sand in this corner here. So I'm going to bring this across. Now I'll make this colour darker a little bit later. So nice horizontal sweeps, that's something to practice, that one. I often recommend that it's worthwhile doing something like this on a scrap piece of paper first before you commit to actually jumping in the deep end. But I want this thing to be in this corner here. Horizontal brush strokes. We can work in between the rocks, we can kind of connect this area together. Now that needs to go a little bit deeper and darker, so we're going to start to darken it. With it being this evening picture, sunset or sunrise, however you see it, colours are going to be a little bit richer, especially in these foreground areas. Notice the taper, that's quite important, because I want to bring this thing forward now. So that is made up of horizontal brush strokes. I'll even put some grey into it as well for the darkness. So I'm using a bit of grey here, sweeping across. So I'm putting shadows into this. And this colour, what I've just mixed, if I pop a touch more blue into the same colour, it can make it a little bit darker. So again, working right underneath here, really getting into those areas and making sure it's got these nice sort of spiky points at the sides. Don't be afraid to use a bit of dark stuff, especially in these corners. Now that plastic card that we used for doing the rocks, we could also use that for putting some little sort of pebbly bits in the beach actually. So if we zoom in a bit closer here, we can use this corner of a card and we can sort of do little tiny rocky areas and sort of scraping off bits of colour here. Imagine a few boulders on the beach, that kind of thing. Scraping. There we go, so little scratches in the foreground. It just brings it forward slightly. And because the paint's thick, it's going to allow the paint to come off nice and easy. There we go, lovely. That works. I can always put a bit more in there later, but while I'm kind of close into that area, what I want to do is I want to pop in some little sort of pebbly areas from the edge of the beach. So So I'm using the grey mix again. Remember, that's the 3 primary colours. You can pop little sort of dots for little pebbles working across. You can bring these things right over and you just get a bit dotty, to be honest, you know. A little bit spotty, a little bit dotty here in the foreground area. So just little bits of interest and bits of texture, you know. Little bits of texture. I'm going to put some waves in this thing, some rolling waves a bit later. We'll get to that before we finish. Little dots and spots. Making sure that I'm using the grey quite heavy. You've all seen the sort of pebbly beach kind of thing going off, so that's kind of what we're working towards. And while I'm using this, using a bit of a dry brush, which is kind of making the brush go a bit splayed, we can do some horizontal lines below the rocks to almost give a slight reflection. You don't really tend to see much in the way of reflection on a seascape, to be honest, but a little bit would be quite nice on these edges, especially that little bit of texture here, which is quite effective. If I zoom in close, you can see the texture or the grain of the paper that we're actually applying. So that's a good way of working it into your picture. And then again, little tiny dots and spots on the edges, making sure things are nice and rich, nice and strong. It's all about foreground detail, really. I know it's kind of hiding behind the logo there, but just little sort of dots and spots in this corner. It's quite effective, and it's a lovely way of achieving texture. Now, if I turn this thing on the side for a second, just to confuse you a little bit, and then what we'll do is we'll put some depth into this using the same colour and the same spiky brush. Now this is something to practice basically, but I'm just going to pop in some reflection below these kind of rocky areas. So I'm dragging the paint down from below these rocks, and it just helps to give a slight hint of reflection. Like I say, on a seascape you don't tend to get a huge amount of reflection. One thing you would get would be the sun. We'll get to that reflection later on, but a few downward brush strokes to give a bit of depth is quite nice. It's nice to paint something vibrant, and all the time that you're touching this paper with your paintbrush, folks, you're not thinking about, see the depth, you're not thinking about what's happening outside, you know. It's all about this for that short space of time that you're painting. And that's why these workshops have been a godsend to a lot of people. I'm getting lovely messages from people saying how much they're enjoying them. So well done if you've took part in the Brave New World watercolour workshops. Let's use something called the branch and detail brush now, folks. Or you could use a rigger brush. I mean, this is my own design brush. This is the branch and detail brush here, so you can see it's a beautiful pointy brush with a reservoir at the bottom. I just want to get close into these buildings again here and pop a little bit of detail into them using again some of the grey. You're going to use a lot of grey in watercolours because it's the shadow colour. Well, it is for me. Different artists use different variations of this, but I like to use grey, so I can use this brush like a pen actually, so I can make sure that things are nice and crisp. Put little bits of interest around here. Pop little sort of doorway just down there. Little windows and little bits of stuff, random stuff. We could also drop in a few birds as well. Actually, let's pop some birds in. If you leave a little gap between them, you get the impression of the seagull there. So I'm just sweeping around here. So little bits of interest. But remember, this is all very much in the background, these buildings here, so they're very, very much out of focus, so it's not necessary to put a huge amount of detail in at all. I can pop some little silhouettes of little trees and things around here as well, little sort of dots and spots. Just basically spotting the brush, and it just gives interest to that area, helps to give people a bit more of a focus on what's happening. I'm thinking like an old sort of shack by the sea kind of thing. Might be a toilet block. So just basically dotting and spotting on the tops of these, just gives a bit of interest. There we are. They're addictive, these brushes, they let you fiddle. Again, everything we're using is available just here, folks, on the website, Watercolour TV. That's the video on demand place as well, so if you do, we sell the books on there as well. Or of course you can get all the books direct from Search Press as well. Marvellous. Okay, I'm just going to pop in a couple more birds actually. Let's have a little look around here. Just want a couple more seagulls. So there's one. Where is it? There it is. Just off screen, look. A couple of little birds hanging around. Maybe just on the distance here we could pop in a little bit of extra lines of detail. We can darken the base as much as you want to on these distant mountains. They can look a bit crisper. We could even have a look down below just here, around the base of this water here, while I've got this brush and while I've got this colour. And we can just pop in a few little hints of reflections here and there as well, which is quite effective. So I've just reloaded that brush, you know, after using it for a good 5 or 6 minutes there. So if this was a traditional rigger brush, you would be spending quite a lot of time forever reloading, you know. That's kind of how these things work. Love the buildings. They give that wonderful sense of depth and scale, because you can relate to those and you kind of know how big or small the things are, putting little spots around here. This is the detail stage of the picture, you know. So these little bits of reflection. I'm going to put some movement in the water very shortly, which is healthy, of course. Let's have a little. Let's just zoom back a touch here. I mean, we can see we've got this wonderful distance going off. This. Pop in some little bits of depth. When I started painting this picture, all I knew is I wanted to do a sunset and I wanted to do a seascape, and you just don't know how the painting is going to evolve until you do it. And that's what I enjoy about painting. This style of painting, obviously everybody paints something different, of course they do. Everyone likes to do, some people like to work from photograph, which I do a lot of. Work from life, of course, getting outside painting as well is something I do a lot of. But in this particular scene, it's working from nothing at all, and we're creating a picture out of nothing. This is quite a dark area just here. Now what I've got, another optional brush that you could use is something like a lift out brush. Now a lift out brush is basically a square brush. This is an extra large one. It's basically a brush that lets me go in and put light into a picture. So I can go in basically and I can pop some little highlights and little bits on these edges, and I can dab it off. Now you could use any square brush for that. This particular one is called a lift out brush. You can see it's removing the colour, and it puts a bit of, maybe you didn't quite do a great job of your plastic card scrapey thing and you want to get a bit more detail out of it, then perfect tool for the job. And even if we get closer to the buildings again there, I could, you know, a simple thing like putting a bit of light on the edge of that roof there, dab it off, you know, it makes the thing look a bit more crisp. Same as down here, if I was to lighten this corner here, dab that off, you can see it just puts a bit of light in the building. So it's just, it's an interesting way of adding detail, basically removing paint rather than applying it. And it's quite an addictive way of working, actually. It is. Optional, of course. And even in your skies, if anybody wasn't too happy with the clouds and you think, you know something, I want to get a bit more light in these clouds. Well, if you've got a brush like this, lift out brush, I mean, this is probably a good example here. I could probably lighten the edge. I'm sort of twisting the corner of this special brush, or just a damp brush would actually do this, to be honest, but you can just sort of take away a little bit of light. Can you see it's removed a bit of light there? It's almost like it's catching light from the sun, creating a bit more depth and a bit more interest in your clouds. and it's going to bring that part of the cloud forward. So if you give that a good old tap, again you can see it's kind of separated the clouds a little bit, and that's the colour what came off. You can see the sort of rusty red on the tissue there. So yeah, watercolour is good at that. It's great for that. And around here you could actually wash off some horizontal highlights around the base of the sky, because where the sun goes down you always get that little bit of a light cloud at the bottom. You can see those little bits of highlights just going in. A few lighter clouds, which is quite addictive and quite enjoyable. So if we look back at the whole picture, we're getting there, folks. What we want to do is we just want to pop in something in the water there and make sure that's all nice and crisp and everything. I'm going to pop in a few little sort of taps of darkness in this corner. I'm just using that square brush to do that. Just sort of tapping a bit of grey into there for this demonstration. And that's going to give me a little bit of interest to that area. If you've got a darker corner, it's going to make all this open up. We're going to pop something in the water now, folks, and for this I'm using the size 10 brush, and I'm going to use the grey again. I'm going to dilute the grey. Remember, that's the same grey I started with. It was blue. It was about 70% blue, tiny bit of red, so you get this kind of purple tinge here, and then you put yellow into that and you'll see it kind of starts to go grey. See the grey colour? So it's a mixture of your sort of primary colours, but it's so important to use the right grey. Don't use Payne's grey, it's too dark basically. So a bit of a dab on tissue. I want to darken this foreground here with horizontal sweeps. So I'm keeping the lines nice and straight. It does help to stand up to do this, as daft as it seems. I'm going to work this towards the background, easing it off as it goes away. Let's get a bit closer in for you so you can see what we're doing here. This is going to make the water look as though it's just got that little bit of movement to it, you know. Over this side as well. So a nice calm sea. We'll pop in the reflection of the sun before we finish, don't worry about that. And of course at the same time as doing this, it'll almost help to give the impression of a little hint of reflection of these sort of distant mountains. Not as though you'd expect to see much of a reflection there. You wouldn't, but you know, sometimes a suggestion of is quite nice. I want to come back down to the foreground and pop a few more on. So sort of coming out from the edge of the beach there. So if it's, again, like we said, if it's darker corners, it's going to work really well. Over this side as well. Lovely. So that's going to give me that little sense. I'm trying to keep light around where the sun is. Beautiful. Now I'm just going to give that a couple of seconds to soak in. We'll take a look back at the picture. There's a few more things I want to do, and they're always the bits that make the difference. So again, stick with us, because it's always the last little bits of the picture that always make the difference work. Getting rich, strong colours here is going to make such a big difference on this, okay? So again, a few more little bits around this side here. Now if you've got quite a rich painting like this, quite a strong picture, notice the light I've left here, by the way, from the sun. It's also a good idea to pop in some little bits of light, and we can use light a few ways, you know, it's always a nice thing to do, and it's kind of the bit that makes the biggest difference, okay? So using some white paint actually is a good idea, and I've got a particular colour called natural white, there it is, and it's my own sort of white colour, but any rich vibrant white would work perfectly well for this. So you could use gouache or acrylic, or any kind of rich white paint would be fine for this one. So it's an optional thing to do, but I like to see this in a picture, and I'm going to use this on a scrap piece of paper. And the reason I do this because I tend to forget that I put it in my palette. This does want to be fresh, by the way. This has got to be fresh white watercolour, and this is going to make that get a little bit of rolling wave action and a little bit of light in the water. This is a great thing to do. So I want to zoom in closer to the water here so we can sort of see what we're doing. There we go. and I'm going to use the plastic card, the short edge of the plastic card. I'm going to put the white on the card and then onto the paper. You'll see what I mean by this. The workshop, the live workshop that we did on Saturday, which was the Welsh Seascape with everybody, that one was, we had the same technique was used on that for those who were watching that joined in. So I want to mix around a little bit of moisture into the white, not too much, because the problem with white paint is it can dry too transparent, so you don't want too much water on it. So that nice bit of white paint on the brush there, and then on the edge of a card, make sure it's pretty clean. So if I sort of do this on the edge here, nice thick white paint. Now what starts to happen is it starts to gather on one side of the card. You can probably just about make that out there. Now that's a good way of getting a rolling wave effect. We don't want big rolling waves, just little ones really. So I'm just going to zoom into this corner here. I'm just going to pop in a little bit of a roll, sort of pull it down a bit, move across. Can you see that little bit of a sort of rolling wave effect? And this is literally putting pure white on it, which is quite nice. So a couple of little bits of this would be quite effective actually. A couple of little bits of white here and there, just like a little bit of a breaking wave. Quite addictive as well actually. I'm sure you could imagine that. I was going to do a little sort of tap just like that there. You can see a little bit of a practice this one, you know, that's what I'll say to you about this. If you've never done it before, you've never lived. Give it a go, it's really quite enjoyable. And down here as well, like little bits of white here and there. Now if your white starts to dry, just pop a touch of water, but like I said, try and avoid putting too much water with this, because it's dead easy to over brighten. But we've got white in the sun pretty much, so this will work really well. So I'm sort of tapping that little bit of white, and of course right at the end of this we'll zoom back and we'll see the picture in its finished state. I want to pop a few more of these. Now at the minute I'm doing this on an angle, so I'm sort of holding the card on a bit of an angle and sort of tapping it in like so. Turn the card over if there's a bit on the other side. Why not make use of it? You might as well. There we go. But if you want to do it with a little bit more fine lines, put a little bit less on the card to start with. I'm just going to actually come back over here and pop one a bit stronger over there as well. But if you hold your card kind of right angle and sort of tap it along the back as you do with these, keep putting a bit more paint on, you'll get obviously finer ones, and you can just kind of hopefully see them there. These always work lovely. Even around the base of these rocks, look, you can pop some little bits. Let's just have a little close-up look at that there. It's really quite nice, this. It's enjoyable. Simple techniques using simple little sort of household things. You know, just grab a plastic card, and we've used plastic card here for doing the rocks down here. Of course we did it for this, for the cliffs. And of course I believe you can watch this back at any time. I'm just throwing the brush on the floor. Getting excited then. Pop that on. The joys of doing live. I do a lot of live TV shows with Hochanda. And I've done some with Search Press on Hochanda as well. A few. And I love the spontaneous feeling of doing live stuff. It really is really enjoyable. So keep an eye on that, folks, as well. And don't forget, we're doing the live stuff on Sunday, the live workshop on Sunday. And this is the place to book it, just here. And over this side of the screen you've got a wonderful Search Press logo. Remember, Search Press are the biggest and best publisher of art and craft books. I've got 4 books out there at the minute. We've got the Watercolour for the Absolute Beginner, of course. We've also got the step-by-step guide to watercolours, which is my favourite book. I'll show you these before we finish. And of course we've got the new Watercolour Mountain using 3 colours. Take 3 colours, very similar to the picture we're doing today. 9 projects using 3 colours. Loving the white. Don't forget to wipe off your white from you in case you scrape a rock and then you end up with a bit of white hanging around, so watch out for that. Yeah, so if you zoom back a little bit here, folks, we can see how the white has lifted this thing forward. But I want to get a little bit extra light into the picture. And for this, I'm going to use a craft knife, quite a sharp craft knife. This is a very sharp craft knife here, folks. I'm sure the people watching this have got something they could use. And physically cutting the paper, don't be afraid to actually do this, you know, and just let it be, really. So if we go in and we take a look at the sun, for example, here, we can use the craft knife and we can physically and aggressively do horizontal. Can you see that light coming through? It really does work lovely against the grain of the paper, so you can get that sort of hint of light. And if you put any bits of white on that you wasn't too keen on, maybe they finished a bit abrupt, you could use the knife to extend them and give it a bit more, a little bit extra texture. It's also a way of scraping away any bits of seepage as well that you might have. There we go. So a nice bit of scraping going off over here on the beach. You can see those little lines coming in. It makes such a difference, it really does. If I zoom in closer so you can see that a little bit better, what a difference that makes. And physically it's cutting the paper. Beginners tend to be a bit worried about doing that, but you know, it's all part of what it is. And it's lovely where you'd imagine the sun shining. And of course, if you wanted to go in and put any extra little bits of white hanging around, a good brush to do that would be a square brush, with the white paint, of course. So if I put some white on the tip of a square brush, I could say I just want to get a few extra little horizontal areas around for the reflection of the sun. So it makes sure you're nicely lined up, of course, and it just helps to give it that little bit extra. And of course, it's always, if we zoom back and look at the whole picture now, we've got light, and we can see the whole scene in its entirety. So I just want to do something that's quite important, folks. A few things to mention again. Please do check out the books with Search Press. We've got the Watercolour Mountains here. Of course, you can see these all. You can see these all online. Watercolour for the Absolute Beginner, which is my bestseller book, and it was #1 on Amazon just recently, so it's officially a bestseller. Painting Without Paint, of course, is using the tablets to do creative art. Someone sent me an email just now asking, because I've got my live email on, asking if you can see some examples of this. Well, there's one of New York. There's a nice autumnal scene. Beautiful. This is the kind of thing you can do. There's a nice kind of snow scene, a mountain scene there. But you can really create some wonderful, wonderful scenes. Look at the scene of Venice here, using iPad art. Of course, David Hockney's recently been doing some stuff on iPad art, so check it out, folks. And then, of course, we've got Matthew Palmer's step-by-step guide to watercolour, which has got gorgeous seascapes, beautiful, beautiful snow scenes, nice Mediterranean scene there for you. Nice cottage garden, nice poppy meadow. These are all in step-by-step, of course they are, because it's Search Press and they produce some of the best quality art and craft books out there. Every brushstroke is detailed, folks. Look at this gorgeous Northumberland seascape in detail, and this gorgeous New York Central Park in the autumn or the summer, all detailed. And then, of course, we've got this gorgeous snow scene as well. So that's the step-by-step guide to watercolours. At the end of a demonstration, I always like to pop on a mount, because it always makes the biggest impact is popping on a beveled mount at the end of a picture. And that's the same if you take your masking tape away as well. Taking your masking tape away just makes such a difference, and that makes a crisp, beautiful watercolour scene, folks. So I hope you've enjoyed watching that. Thanks for sticking around. Don't forget you can watch it again. Please check out everything that Search Press do, and make sure you check out my website as well, Watercolour TV, for live workshops, video on demand. And I want to say a big thank you for everybody that's tuned in and watched the live demonstration, and I hope you've enjoyed the watching paint dry, basically. and hope everybody's keeping well and safe, of course. And I'll see you again for more watercolour painting. Make sure you head over to my Facebook page as well, folks. The link is in the description for this post. It's Matthew Palmer Artist. Hit like. Doing loads of live stuff. I've got a live demo tomorrow at 2 PM on my YouTube channel as well. So make sure you go on there and hit subscribe. That's just Matthew Palmer on YouTube. And thank you and goodbye.